I looked over, we're like this far apart. And the demon has this hideous grin. And I look over, and then the body starts to rise. And then my eyes are like, pray, 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 pray. But then the devil knows, I have you on the hook. I can reel you in now.
Now in this video, I'd like to cover two things. One is about a video that accused Father Vincent Lampert of spreading false teachings, and then secondly about the child abuse scandal.
And I tweeted out that my Catholic children will be attending Pride events, as this Catholic will. And, you know, my faith always taught me, what would Jesus do?
Yes.
And I know Jesus would be attending that Pride parade.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless his holy name.
Hi, thanks for tuning in to Armor of God again. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. And hopefully all of you will at least learn something from this video. Well, here's the thing, and although I've released a video about this on our other channel, but still there's something that Father Daniel Reehil shared before that makes me want to cover about the video accusing Father Vincent Lampert of spreading false teachings, and that's supposed to be coming out of a Catholic channel. Just like before, when these three guys mocked Father Lampert, but then these three are not Catholics, so I can at least try to be understanding even though I don't like it.
So was she possessed by a demon, you believe?
So then again, I had her go through steps to see a psychiatrist.
Okay. So he saw he saw her morph into a reptile, and it's still no demon.
He's like, have you seen the doctor, though?
He should be the last person to actually believe that the person's dealing with a demon because he's an exorcist.
That's stupid.
But here's one where it's made by someone who called himself Catholic, and when I looked a little bit further, it appears he doesn't approve anything that comes out post-Vatican II. Remember what Father Chad Ripperger said before, respect the priests.
Most priests today have been not the best in regard to education. They've all been prone to a lot of error, but that doesn't mean that you disrespect his authority by usurping his authority. St. Thomas actually calls that the sin of usurpation. There also comes from a general mistrust of the church, the clergy, because of rampant heresy. But just because of that, you still have to keep your circumspection when you're around him. And you know, the reason I say that is because, you know, even to the worst of priests, I still have strong inclinations. Among priests, they can it's a general considered acceptable thing, practice to call each other by your first names among priests. But even that, there's still a strong inclination to me to want to call Father. And even if he's a bad priest, I've always treated priests with respect because of that. Because of the fact that they're a priest. This is a guy who could forgive my sins.
Anyway, like I said earlier, there's something that Father Daniel Reehil shared before that I'd like to share with you here, and perhaps this will help those who are so quick to be harsh and disrespectful towards our priests. Please listen to this.
If there's no priest, there's no Eucharist. And if there's no Eucharist, there's no church. That's it. That kind of puts things in perspective, doesn't it? And you know, the true priest that has a heart after God, he's not a priest for himself. He does not give himself absolution. He can't administer the sacraments to himself. He is not for himself. He is for you. So after God, the priest has everything because he's giving you the sacraments. It's by the power of God through the grace of the Holy Spirit, but it's the priest who brings you salvation in the form of the sacraments. So there's such a lot to say about the priesthood. One thing I'd like to tell you is Satan hates the priest. Satan hates the Eucharist. Satan hates the church. That's very clear. And as I said, take away the priest, you take away the Eucharist, take away the Eucharist, you take away the church. Now, in the last 50 years, the number of priests in the United States has decreased by 60%. Did you hear me? 60%. While the population of the United States has more than doubled. So there's over 3,500 churches that do not have a resident pastor. What do I mean by that? That means that there is a priest who drives in from another church to celebrate the sacraments and then drives away. He does not live on the property. He lives at another church, a neighboring parish. 3,500 churches in America alone that do not have a resident pastor. That's astonishing. Now, in 1970, globally, on the whole planet, there was 420,000 priests, almost 500,000. Today, there's 414,000 priests. So we've declined, not by much. However, the Catholic population on the planet has doubled from 650 million Catholics in 1970 to 1.3 billion Catholics today. So again, less priests per capita to minister to the people. And the numbers aren't getting any better. They're going down and down and down. So think about it, the last many years coming, there have been hard years on the church for decades. All sorts of reasons you could put there for whatever reason, but it's been difficult. But it's also been a hard year, all these years, for priests. I remember when I was living in Boston right after 9/11. So that would be 2002, right? I think so. 2001. I think I moved to Boston in the fall of 2001. And then in early 2002, the scandal of priests abusing children broke in Boston, of all places. And I remember the hatred people had towards priests, not just the newspapers. It was not everybody. I'm not painting the whole town of Boston with hatred against priests, but the people, the loudest, were the ones who hated the priests. Always is the situation, right? So I was living with Father Tom at the time, and we used to go in the afternoon and walk the whole length of the beach, which is probably about half a mile. It would be sort of like our exercise for the day. And, it's a nice time to clear your head in the afternoon. Well, once that happened, people would stop their car because there's a road that lines the beach. They would stop their car and they'd get out to yell at the priest. You pedophile, you child abuser. Is that your boyfriend walking with you? The most vile things. And this was a priest who never did anything but serve the Lord. And served him well. And he's still alive. God bless him. This man gave up his entire life to serve Jesus. Every moment of his life was about serving Jesus. He had no free time for his own, really. It was always whatever God wanted. And the people just attacked him. And I'm sure he wasn't alone. I remember Father Benedict Groeschel telling me that before the scandal, when he walked through airports, people were so kind, and they would greet him and hug him and tell him, thank you for being a priest. And then after the scandal broke, he would walk through the airport and he'd see mothers grabbing their children and pulling them away out of the aisle of the walkway of the airport, as though he was going to molest them publicly in the middle of an airport. Those things, they leave a mark, even on priests. We have hearts that get affected by the way people treat us. And hopefully we're men enough to forgive quickly and offer it to the Lord as a sacrifice. And I'll tell you, when you look at the priests, they're tired, they're exhausted, they're worn out. And I was speaking to a group of about 4 or 5 while we were waiting to process into the church. And the topic of vacation came up with one of the younger priests. He hadn't taken any vacation last year. He's been too busy. And you know what? He hadn't been able to take his canonical retreat. And one of the older priests said, Father, you have to take your retreat. It's not an option. It's vital to your vocation. You must take your retreat. But my point is this, that they wouldn't be so tired and worn out if they weren't doing the work of God, And we're not complaining, but you must know the truth. These men work tirelessly to bring you God and to bring you to God. That's all. So pray for them. Just pray for your priests.
Obviously, there are times when I too disagree with some of the things said by some priests, but you'll never hear me say anything to lead people to disrespect and insult the priests. Anyway, now, for the next clip, I'd just like to cover a little bit on what Father Reehil said earlier about the child abuse scandal. And as you've seen part of the clip from The View that I shared with you in the beginning of this video, I'd like to share what a priest, Father Leo, thought about what she said. I'll share the clip of The View here again, and it's worth reminding that it was Father Reehil who said the show should be called The View from Hell instead.
And I read this tweet by Bishop Tobin, who's a Catholic bishop, and he comes out and he says that he wants to remind all Catholics not to support or engage in any pride and participate in any pride parades or anything supporting the LGBTQ community because it's against Christian values and that it's harmful to children. And I tweeted out that my Catholic children will be attending pride events, as this Catholic will. And, my faith always taught me what would Jesus do?
Yes.
And I know Jesus would be attending that Pride parade.
With pride.
And I also, with pride. And I also know that God is love. And Jesus is love.
Yeah.
And love is love. And for a Catholic bishop to come out and say something like that, given the history of pedophilia in the Catholic Church, given what the Catholic Church has hidden about the abuse of children, some would say that being at a pride parade would be much safer for a child than it has been to be in a Catholic church for many years.
Anyway, here's the clip of Father Leo.
I can actually say that this is a deplorable woman. This is a deplorable person who, first of all, has bad logic. She's constantly trying to bring up, it's just basically like a straw man argument, saying just because the cat, and it's also the fallacy of the whole to the parts to the whole, saying just because the Catholic Church has had this problem of pedophilia, which it has, by the way, it wasn't motivated by their Catholic faith, it was motivated by worldly attitudes, but because the Catholic Church, some of its members, less than 1%, Sonny, so get your facts straight, less than 1% of priests who committed pedophilia, now the whole teachings of the Catholic Church goes bad. Secondly, to expose yourself to the kind of things that you see in pride parades is safer for your children? You have got to be kidding me. This is the kind of garbage that I'm trying to warn people of in this show. These women on The View will lead you to confusion, depression, anger, and sin. They really will. If you are taking your faith cues from these women, fine. If you want to watch them because you think they're entertaining, fine. If you like this as entertainment, I think that you need to maybe watch something else. But if you want to be formed by these women, then you have made a choice to truly confuse your mind. You have made a choice to hurt your soul and to open the door to evil. I can't be any more clear. Thankfully, there are women who understand better what life really means.
Now before we end, I'd just like to talk just a little bit about Father Vincent Lampert again. Having interviewed him earlier this year, and I had a wonderful time learning from him, and to learn about people insulting him, spreading lies about him, I cannot help myself but talk about it. And then I listened to what Father Reehil said on what the priests are going through, and so, connecting the two, the lies about Father Lampert and then what Father Reehil shared, I'm sorry, but I am truly disappointed at the person behind that kind of video.
I looked over, we're like this far apart. And the demon has this hideous grin, and I look over, and then the body starts to rise, and then my eyes are like, pray, 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 pray. But then the devil knows, I have you on the hook. I can reel you in now.
Well then, that will be all for the video this time. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. And hopefully all of you have learned something from this video. Just remember that if there's any feedback or suggestion, please let us know in the comments below. Anyway, if you like what we do and you'd like to support us, I left a link to our PayPal donation in the description box below, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your continuous support, contributions, and prayers. And until the next one, thanks again for watching, and may God bless you.
In his magisterial document, Consecrated Life, stated that obedience is not blind. Christian obedience is not a blind obedience. It is an informed obedience. So basically, obedience is following the dictates of one's conscience as formed, that's the key, as formed by the church. So we allow the church's teachings to form our conscience. Take, for example, the Blessed Virgin Mary at the moment of the Annunciation. She was asked by the angel Gabriel to become the Mother of God, and Mary could not understand how this was possible. Unlike Zechariah, to whom the same angel appeared earlier, telling him that his wife, despite her advanced age, would conceive, and laughed at the angel, and on account of that was struck dumb, Mary questioned with filial trust, how is this possible, as I do not know man? So her question was not mocking God like that of Zechariah, was not the attitude like that of Zechariah, but it was an attitude that she assumed of wanting her human intellect and her will to work in sync. Blind obedience does not allow the intellect and the human will to work in sync. Blind obedience engages only the will while the intellect is completely ignorant. This is not Christian obedience. That's blind obedience. And the church does not advocate blind obedience. Christian obedience is when the will seeks to obey while allowing the grace of God to inform its intellect. Now, this does not mean that everything that you may be commanded by the church concerning its moral and faith teachings, you understand completely. It doesn't mean you completely understand it, but it means that you do understand to some degree the rationale behind this teaching, while allowing God's grace through time and through ongoing reflection and counsel, as Mary did, pondering it in your heart. Like when Jesus was found in the temple, they didn't understand why he did that, but they accepted it and they pondered on it, she and Joseph, until it finally made more and more sense. And they realized that those 3 days of him missing were a prelude of the 3 days he would again be missing in the tomb before his resurrection. But they didn't get it right away. But they obeyed, knowing that faith and reflection and pondering and counsel, which Mary also received, as well as Joseph, would lead to a more exponential, gradual understanding of this truth. That is the attitude Mary had. And that's not the attitude Zechariah had. And that's not the attitude these people have that openly undermine the authority of the Pope. And one of the presumptions of those who do so is that they assume that they either are to be given full knowledge of anything that the church teaches, or they can reject it. And this is presumption.